award-winning journalist Aaron Matei is with us, ladies and gentlemen, from The Nation magazine. Of course, what did he win his award for? He won his award for writing about Russiagate and holding to journalistic principles, which is what the rest of journalism hasn't done. So now he has to spend the rest of his life working in a career with those pieces of shit.
I basically won an award for not believing in Santa Claus. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Well, not only that, but after someone told you there was no Santa Claus, after you saw your dad putting the presents under the tree, you didn't continue to believe in Santa Claus, which is what
That's right.
which is what the rest of journalism has done. So I just wanted to start off this segment because I'm going to just talk to you about what Mueller's press conference, what he said, and the controversy over it, and the fact that the Russiagators are still going, right? So I don't know if you heard my analogy about when in the West, when they would put together a posse to go get some bad guys, they would bring extra horses with them in case the horse they were riding got sick or broke or tired, and they would just hop on the other horse who was fresh. And that's exactly what the Russiagators have done. So Mueller's report decimated the premise that Trump was in criminal conspiracy with the Russian government that killed it, cut the legs right from underneath it. So that horse got tired. They jumped on another horse, which is obstruction of justice, and as if it was just as important and just as bad, and as if it happened. And they're just writing that. Is that a good analogy, Aaron?
Yeah, except at least, in fairness to the posse, at least the horses are real. The horses exist. Whereas the original premise of Russiagate starts with a fantasy that Donald J. Trump conspired with the Russian government, for which there was no basis. And then now they're jumping onto this thing about obstruction into the investigation into this fictitious thing. So, although I just give the posse more credit, basically.
And so when I talk to normal people, when I go to comedy clubs, which I do almost every night now, I'm back in it, baby. And so when I'm going out and I'm talking to regular people, what I mean regular people, like waiters or waitresses or other comedians or the owners of clubs, people who aren't in politics. That's what I mean. Regular people who aren't journalists and who aren't in politics, normal people we would call civilians. That's what comedians call them, civilians. So when I start to talk about this, even though they all credit me with, wow, you were right about that Russiagate and we thought you were crazy, they go, but this thing about him, of course he obstructed. I mean, Trump is, come on, he's so corrupt. He's so corrupt. And I always have to tell them, Trump is definitely corrupt, but more corrupt than who? Who is he more corrupt than? Is he more corrupt than Dick Cheney and George Bush, who actually lied us into wars? They're literal war criminals. I don't think he's that corrupt yet. Is he more corrupt than Barack Obama, who didn't prosecute those war criminals and didn't prosecute anybody on Wall Street while he took the people's houses away and then opened the Arctic to drilling twice? He built the cages the immigrants were in. He deported more Mexicans than all the other presidents combined. He then prosecuted journalists at a record pace. 8 prosecutions using the why am I blanking on the
whistleblower.
He prosecuted whistleblowers using the Espionage Act. That's what I was looking for, the Espionage Act. So Donald Trump is more, and I just want to show you, here's Dylan Radigan, and he made this point at the beginning of Trump's presidency, and here's what he had to say about it.
So, again, while the FBI director example gives those with a partisan view against Donald Trump, and it's easy to be against Donald Trump, the obvious fuel to suggest that he's a criminal who's a terrible guy, blah, 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 under investigation, probably true. But if you believe that, then you probably also need to consider that Hillary Clinton was taking money through her foundation to do weapons deals overseas while personally enriching herself, and that Barack Obama is paid off by the private health insurance companies and the banks to make sure that we don't actually have proper health care or a functioning financial system. It's hard to believe one and not accept the other two.
So what I would that's a truism that people don't say enough. And so when I try to tell people that, they're like, oh, they never even entertained, like, well, who is Trump? Trump's just a bigger public asshole than any other president or politician. He's not a more corrupt asshole. They're all as corrupt as he is. They're all as big as criminals as he is. And so that's the thing people have to remember. And that's why we got Trump, because both parties are so criminally corrupt and legislating against their own voters. That's why we got Trump. Not because the Democrats are doing everything they could to help people out. They can't even get clean water in Flint in 8 fucking years. So that's why we got Trump, and that's what this is about. And you have to remember that Robert Mueller is a liar of the first order, and he should be in prison himself, which leads me to his press conference, right? So by the way, here's from the Huffington Post. This is how confusing this is getting. It says Robert Mueller is not saying that Donald Trump committed crimes. Okay, so where does this come from? So here he is, right? So
the report has 2 parts, addressing the 2 main issues we were asked to investigate. The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election. This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy.
That's it. It's over. Aaron, let me just bring you in. That would be in normal situations. That would be it. That thing we were charged with investigating, turns out there's no evidence to charge anybody with anything. So that's it. Right?
Yeah, it should be. Though, by the way, Mueller is, I'm increasingly convinced, such a political actor that even his language there diverges from what his report says. His report says simply that the evidence does not establish that there was a conspiracy. There now at his press conference, where, and again, he says that the report is the final word. That's my testimony. You should believe the report. But when he's speaking in public, he says that there was not sufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy, which was like catnip for all these conspiracy theorists who've been saying, since his report was released, that the only reason Mueller didn't charge a conspiracy is because there wasn't a sufficient enough legal basis for it, not because there was no evidence for it. So even there, I think Robert Mueller is throwing them a bone, but ultimately the result is the same. There is no, there's not sufficient evidence, or the evidence does not establish, whatever language you want to use, whether it's Mueller's press conference or his report. There is nothing there to allege a conspiracy, because there is no Trump-Russia conspiracy. His report is simply a series of contacts with people who are either Russians or who claim to know Russians. None of them are on the actual Russian government's behalf, except for the Russian ambassador, basically. But yet, because simply the name Russia is thrown out and Trump is thrown out, everything is seen as damning and incriminating, and even an investigation, as Mueller says, does not provide sufficient evidence to charge a conspiracy. Even then, people still want to believe that there was a conspiracy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So people still believe there was one. He just couldn't prove it.
Yeah.
Trump is such a mastermind that he was able to conceal this thing that's obvious to everybody from 50 FBI investigators and Robert Mueller. He's such a idiot, moron, and a loser, and he's so sloppy and an amateur that he was able to conceal working with as a traitor to our country at the top of government. He's able to conceal that, though, even though it's obvious to everyone. So you see how none of this makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to say, the existence of this thing is really worth looking at, because
of what thing?
Of this whole Russiagate scandal.
Right.
As you say, what these cynical people behind it have done is they've co-opted the very legitimate fear and disdain for Donald Trump and what he represents, which any progressive, fair-minded person can sympathize with. Trump is a misogynist. He's a racist. He's a warmonger. Plenty of reasons to oppose Donald Trump and want him out of office. What they've done, though, is they've co-opted that legitimate fear of Donald Trump, and they've channeled it into a very narrow and totally baseless conspiracy theory, under which the only way the prevailing way that we are supposed to challenge Donald Trump is by being convinced that he conspired with Russia,
right,
and putting our faith in bureaucrats like Robert Mueller, notwithstanding Robert Mueller's own record, which you alluded to. He peddled the Iraqi WMD hoax. As a director of the FBI, he rounded up hundreds of Muslim immigrants for the crime basically of being Muslim or for appearing to be Muslim, and subjected them to harsh detention for which he was sued. But we're supposed to forget all this and put our faith in these people because, this is the way, because basically a faction of the elite has enrolled all of us in their petty grievance with another faction of the elite. They don't like Donald Trump, not because they don't like that he's a warmonger or a racist, but they don't see him as a suitable steward of their empire, of their war machine. Mm-hmm. So because of that, it's like high school. It's like one awful snobby clique doesn't like the other awful snobby clique, which means the rest of us have to pick between which awful snobby clique we have to go with, instead of challenging both of them. And this is why, going back to Watergate, for example, Nixon oversaw, spying and harassing of anti-war activists, black leaders, the assassination of Fred Hampton, the bombing of Cambodia and Laos. But what was he impeached for? He was impeached for a very narrow set of crimes because he attacked another faction of the elite.
That's right.
You can't do that in American politics. So that's what scandals come from, and the people who don't like Trump in the elite have enrolled us in something so stupid and so ultimately self-defeating to the prospects of defeating Trump.
So let's listen to now a little bit more. Now he's going to get into the obstruction part. Here we go.
And in the second volume, the report describes the results and analysis of our obstruction of justice investigation involving the president. The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. We conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting attorney general apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
So what he just said there, and I'm going to ask Aaron your opinion on this. When I heard him say that, what he just said is that well, let me back it up so I don't want to misquote him. So let me just back it up just a little bit.
The president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
So he said if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. So what he's doing right there is what's called complete and utter fucking bullshit. That is turning the legal system on its head. What he's doing is that the president has to assert his innocence. He has to prove a negative that he didn't do something. That's what Robert Mueller just did. And what Robert Mueller and it's even more insidious than what he's doing right there. Because what he's going to go on to say, the reason why he didn't charge the president was because he is legally not allowed to. Even in secret, that's what he's going to say. And why is he not allowed to do that? Well, here we let's listen, and then we'll get. But real quick, Aaron, do you agree with my assessment that what he just did there by saying we didn't have high confidence that he clearly did not commit a crime, that's backwards bullshit, and he's obviously being a political actor when he says that?
100%. He represents the national security state. That's who he identifies with.
Yes.
He probably socializes with people who don't like Trump for the same reason that I outlined before, not because they object to Trump on principle, because they care about immigrants or people abroad who are being bombed by Trump, because these same people have carried out those bombings and those attacks on immigrants before when they were in power, including Robert Mueller. But they don't like Trump for their own petty reasons because they don't see him as a suitable representation of the elite that they're a part of. They don't want him in their clique. But now Robert Mueller comes from the FBI. The FBI opened up this whole investigation on Trump. So Robert Mueller, I think, is covering for that.
Yes.
And that's why he is inverting the legal standard here.
Yes.
It's not a prosecutor's job to say, well,
he's innocent.
We have confidence. Yeah, exactly.
That's not his job.
The prosecutor's job to either charge someone or not charge someone. A prosecutor it's not their job to exonerate someone. So he's inventing this whole new legal standard because he needs to give his constituency something.
And that's the part that people are missing, the people who I talk to, people who are just regular people who don't follow politics that closely, that's the part that they're missing. They don't understand that Robert Mueller is 100% political actor and 100% corrupted.
Exactly right, and which doesn't mean Trump is a great guy.
Right.
It just means that there could be more than that people aside from Trump can also be shady and nefarious. And in this case, Mueller kept this investigation going for 2 years. He knew a long time ago that there was no conspiracy. And then, yes, as we're about to get to, now he's about to give an excuse for why he didn't make a decision, which is telling in itself. So yeah.
So let's get to that part. Here we go. Here's why Mueller says why he didn't charge the president. Here we go.
We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited.
Now, that's an opinion. That's not a fact, because in fact, the sitting attorney general right now disagrees with that, and so have other attorney generals. But hang on, we're going to get to that. Hold on.
The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
So he's making the case that I wanted to charge him. I really did, but I wasn't allowed to under law. And I didn't say anything about that before, during, or after until right fucking now.
Well, and also he's not even saying
What?
I wanted to charge. He's not even saying I wanted to charge him. He's just hinting it.
Yes.
So he's being cowardly.
Yes.
Because he knows he can't say it.
Right.
Because he knows that what he's saying is not actually factually sound. Because the thing is, even if it's true that department policy would have prevented the indictment of a sitting president, and that is a guidance according to the Office of Legal Counsel. Okay, but that's immaterial to Mueller's job. Mueller's job was to reach a decision. If the department doesn't want to charge Donald Trump, then Attorney General Barr can say, well, we're not prevented from doing that. It was Mueller's job, just because the department might be barred from actually issuing an indictment. That doesn't mean that Mueller cannot reach a conclusion
Correct.
on the offense he's investigating.
That's correct.
So if Robert Mueller thinks that Donald Trump committed obstruction, he can say so. And then, he could submit that to his superior officer,
Right.
in this case, Attorney General Barr,
Right.
and it can be on Barr to make that decision or not.
So what you're saying, Aaron, is that, it might not technically be up to the special counsel to charge the president, but he can certainly recommend or say, this is what I found. I found evidence of a crime, and here's the evidence. He didn't do any of that. And he also could have said, yeah, there was a crime that committed. I can't charge him, but here's the evidence, and Congress could charge. He didn't even do that.
Exactly right. And now how he explains that is he goes on to say, well, it wouldn't be fair.
So hang on, hold on. That's what we're
Okay.
going to get to right now. Watch this.
The department's written opinion explaining the policy makes several important points that further informed our handling of the obstruction investigation.
So this is where, without a doubt, right here, what he's about to say right now, where Robert Mueller reveals himself to be doing complete mental gymnastics in order to push a narrative because he doesn't have any evidence. Watch this. Watch what he says.
Those points are summarized in our report, and I will describe two of them for you. First, the opinion explicitly permits the investigation of a sitting president because it is important to preserve evidence while memories are fresh and documents available. Among other things, that evidence could be used if there were co-conspirators who could be charged now. And second, the opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge.
So what Robert Mueller is saying right there is that it would be unfair of my team, the special counsel team, to accuse the president of a crime when there's never going to be a trial, so the president could clear his name. So we can't do that because of all these technicalities. I can't do that, so I can't charge him, and I can't say that because it would be unfair to Trump because there's never going to be a trial, and then all there would be is this accusation from me out there, and Trump would never get to legally clear his name. So it would be unfair to him. Except he's exactly doing that right now in his press conference. So that thing where he's pretending to want to be fair to the president is complete and utter double CK bullshit. Because if he wanted to be fair to the president, he wouldn't hold a press conference where he said, he fucking did a lot of stuff, but I can't prove it. I don't have any confidence that he didn't do it. That's not what a prosecutor ever says.
Exactly right.
That's not what a prosecutor ever says. What a prosecutor says is there isn't enough evidence to charge him. He doesn't say, there isn't enough evidence to clear him.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of how the law works. Robert Mueller knows that. And you know how I know he knows that? I fucking know that. That's how I know he knows that. And that's how I know he's a liar. And that's how I know that every reporter who reported this is also a liar or in a bubble and you can't trust them. It's WMDs all over again. I'll throw it. So that reveals him to be a liar because he's pretending that he cares about fairness. And you can't charge a president because he can't have a trial. And I wouldn't be fair to charge him publicly if he couldn't clear his name publicly in a trial. That is bullshit because what he's doing is he's basically charging him. He's intimating that he did commit these crimes because I can't confirm he didn't. That's not what you're supposed to say. Anyway, go ahead, Aaron. What's your response to that?
Well, exactly right. And he's intimating it publicly in his news conference. And also, so it wasn't fair for him, according to his telling, to charge Trump, but it was fair to then lay out in hundreds of pages this detailed narrative that basically all but accuses Trump of obstruction and makes the case for it, And by the way, what's interesting, look, listen, it's a really academic debate at this point, right? Because Mueller didn't make a decision. And there are all these legal scholars who say, yes, Trump committed obstruction. You have a couple who don't, and then it gets into intent and all this stuff. But a few facts are worth keeping in mind. First of all, there was no underlying crime to obstruct an investigation into, which, although that's not 100% determinative, you can still obstruct an investigation if there is no underlying crime. But the absence of an underlying crime, I think, is at least worth noting.
So what people are really screaming about right now is that, Trump didn't commit this crime, but he obstructed the investigation that would have found out he didn't commit a crime.
Exactly right. And you can also, and then there's also the fact that the reason we know all these damning details about Trump, all the most supposedly damning details, are because are through witnesses that the Trump administration voluntarily
provided.
Offered.
Yes.
They didn't assert executive privilege over anybody. They provided a lot of documents. The most damning stuff comes from Donald Trump's own counsel,
yes.
Don McGahn. So it's it's just curious to accuse Trump of obstruction when the most damning evidence supposedly against him comes from witnesses that he furnished. And also the reporting on all this has left out the fact that Don McGahn, according to the New York Times, told Mueller that he didn't think that Trump was ever obstructing the investigation. Trump was expressing frustration that the investigation was impeding his duties as president, which I think makes sense because he was being accused of being a traitor for 2 years. And Mueller, even though he knew that wasn't true, wasn't saying anything.
Right. And here's one more thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no one can also show what, aside from Trump's tweets and his, and things he said with his mouth, no one can actually show any specific actions that Trump took that really impeded Mueller. And also, Jimmy, in firing Comey, his intent was clearly not shutting down the investigation. It's been interpreted that way because of the interview he gave to Lester Holt.
Right.
But if you look at two things, if you look at Comey's own memo of talking to Trump, his first memo, Comey says that Trump is encouraging him to find the truth because he's saying it's all bullshit, basically. And then also, if you look at that interview with Lester Holt, later on in the interview, this is the part where no one shows, where Trump says he wants the investigation to continue. He wanted to even prolong it. he didn't want Comey in there because he didn't trust Comey anymore. Now, Comey had done things that, first of all, everybody wanted Comey to be fired anyway because of the Hillary Clinton thing.
That's right.
But even putting that aside, Comey, before Trump even got into office, Comey presented Trump with a briefing in which he told him that there's this allegation out there that the Russians have a P-tape of you. And then later on, Comey also
By the way, what Trump knew that wasn't true. So when Comey tells him that the Russians have a P-tape, guess who knows that's not true? Trump.
Yeah. And Comey also said in public testimony in Congress that we're investigating whether or not there was coordination between Trump and Russia, and we're investigating whether there are any crimes being committed. So Comey himself, as FBI director, did a lot of really explosive things publicly that, that understandably annoyed Trump. And also, Trump was trying to get Comey to say, well, at least say that I'm not a target of the investigation, right? And Comey wouldn't even say that either. So basically, Comey, in his capacity as FBI director, was helping fuel the suspicion that Trump was a Russian agent. Because, by the way, not long after Comey briefed Trump on the P-tape, that was leaked.
Yes.
And, and that led to the publication of the Steele dossier. So Trump had many reasons to be, angered with Comey and feelings of Comey was undermining him. And by the way, my own personal theory is that Comey wanted to get fired.
No kidding.
Because Comey wanted to leverage all this into a book deal, which he got. And then he rebranded himself as some patriot.
It would be like if I got fired from MSNBC. Holy shit, would that be great for my brand?
Well, exactly. And he, Comey was, everybody hated Comey on the liberal side, right? So if you're Comey, you're facing a public relations crisis. The dominant networks in media, MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, according to them, you're all a villain. So what better thing for you to do than to rebrand your image, as many of these neocons, by the way, have done, than to all of a sudden come out as being, standing up to Trump. But of course, within a very narrow context of trying to, go along with this narrative that he's a Russian agent, not actually challenging him on his real policies, So for Comey, it was a great move. And the problem is so many people have been duped into thinking that his firing was some grave injustice and an attack on the Republic.
I know. Not at all. He knew that the crime Comey was publicly talking about and stirring up people about was non-existent. The crime that he was investigating didn't happen. So they have to show intent that he was trying to cover up a crime. There's no crime being covered up, which is why there's no obstruction. So it's not hard. Mike Morrell laid this out in Politico 2 frickin' years ago. Why they'll never get an obstruction charge. He was the one who explained why they have to prove intent and why they won't be able to prove it. Mike Morrell, the former director of the CIA, laid this shit out in Politico. Of course, nobody ever talked about that part of the article. They had some bullshit headline on it about Russia, and nobody ever talked about the stuff where I talk about. Anyway, let me just go through this real quick with you. So this is from the Huffington Post. So this is the big controversy, right? And we just showed you what it is, but here it is in print. Maybe it'll help you understand it. This is from the Huffington Post. In a highly criticized press conference ahead of the mid-April release of the redacted version of the Mueller report, the Attorney General, William Barr, remember when he had that press conference everybody went crazy about? So this is what they're talking about. In that press conference, William Barr said that he pushed Mueller on whether the special counsel's team would have sought an indictment, but for the OLC opinion. The OLC opinion being that you can't indict a sitting president, right? That's what the OLC opinion is. And so Barr was like, well, if that wasn't there, would you have pushed for indictment? And Mueller said, no. Well, here, Mueller, Barr told reporters, said, I was not saying that. But for the OLC opinion, he would have found a crime. So Mueller has already previously said that whole thing about me not being able to charge him, that's not why I didn't charge him. I just didn't find evidence of a crime. That's what Mueller was telling Barr. And if he didn't tell Barr that, he's never told anybody else that Barr's lying. In fact, In fact, what Mueller explained this week and in his report was that under his interpretation of the OLC's view and Justice Department policy, he couldn't even attempt to reach a decision on whether the president committed a crime. He could have reached a conclusion, the Attorney General Barr says. The OLC opinion says you cannot indict a president while he is in office, but he could have reached a decision as to whether it was criminal activity or not, which is exactly what we talked about before. A prosecutor's judgment that crimes were committed, but that no charges will be brought, affords no such adversarial opportunity for public name clearing before an impartial adjudicator. That's what Mueller's team wrote. But that's exactly what Mueller did in his press conference. He accused the president of committing crimes by saying, I couldn't clear him, which is what a prosecutor never says. So you're actually accused. I think he might have committed these crimes because I couldn't clear him. But now Trump has no public court to go fucking clear his name. The exact thing he's pretending to care about, he's actually sabotaging. That's what a big, huge, corrupt liar that Robert Mueller is. Even though he looks like he comes right from Central Casting, he's the guy with integrity. He's a war liar. Okay. If they accuse Trump of committing a crime without justice, so blah, blah, blah. So watch this. So Mueller and Barr then had to issue a statement jointly addressing this very thing we're talking about. And here's what they said. The Attorney General has previously stated that the special counsel repeatedly affirmed that he was not saying that, but for the OLC opinion, he would have found the president obstructed justice. So let me unpack that sentence for you. What that sentence actually says in plain English is the Attorney General, meaning Barr, has previously stated that Robert Mueller affirmed that he wasn't considering the OLC's opinion that you can't charge or indict a president. That wasn't entering in to whether or not he concluded Donald Trump did something criminal. So why did he even bring it up at the press conference? Because he's a political actor and he has a constituency to serve, and it's the oligarchy. That's why. So going on, so the special counsel, so they're saying that had nothing to do with Mueller not finding criminal activity. Do you understand what I'm saying? I hope so. So then the next sentence is the special counsel's report and his statement today made clear that the office concluded it would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime. There is no conflict between these statements, and that comes from the Department of Justice and Peter Carr. So that's Barr's office, that's him, and then and a spokesperson for the special counsel's office, that's Mueller. So that's Barr and Mueller spokespeople saying there is no conflict with what Barr and Mueller agree on, which is that the idea that you can indict a sitting president had no weight, bearing, or influence on whether or not Mueller was going to tell you if Trump committed a crime or not, and if there was evidence of it. So this gets real wordy because they use double negatives and not, and all that stuff. But what it's basically saying is what Mueller did at that press conference is reveal himself to be another political actor and a liar, right?
It's so head spinning, and it's but yeah, the fact that basically, obviously Barr's team must have gotten Mueller to sign on to that, to affirm what Mueller obviously told Barr, and which Barr actually quoted him on, because Mueller's press conference sowed confusion. Because again, the dominant narrative has been the opposite of that. The what Mueller fueled in his news conference and what has been the prevailing thinking was that that if not for the OLC memo, Mueller would have charged Trump with criminal activity, and that right there directly contradicts that. But of course, a joint statement carries less weight than, and gets less attention than Mueller's news conference. And Mueller not even directly saying that the OLC memo prevented him from charging Trump with the crime, but strongly hinting that. And so the whole thing is so cynical. It makes everyone's head spin. And there's so many more things, if you look at what Mueller's team has done, that just speak to how disingenuous they are. So according to Barr, when Mueller came to him and said that we're wrapping up our report, we're not going to reach a determination, Barr said, all right, fine. We want to get this report out as fast as possible. So whenever you submit it, make sure that you highlight what part of it is the grand jury material, so we can know which part we have to redact, right? And that will allow us to get this report out quicker. This is according to Barr, and Mueller hasn't contradicted this. Of course, what happened? Mueller submitted the report, and none of that grand jury material was highlighted. And of course, which means that Barr cannot release the report immediately, because you cannot release grand jury material to the public, which means Barr and his team had to go, and along with Mueller, had to go through the whole report and redact all the grand jury material, which delayed the report's public release, which then was blamed on Barr and led to this impression that Barr was engaged in a cover-up and was hiding it from the public, which then Mueller and his team fueled even further when, on the eve of Barr's testimony to the Senate, they released this letter that Mueller had written to Barr, which gave the appearance that Mueller was accusing Barr of covering it up, when really he wasn't. He was just saying that Barr's summary did not fully capture the substance and context of our report. He was not saying that Barr had mischaracterized Mueller or he had misrepresented anything. He was just saying that basically Barr's 4-page letter didn't fully capture the substance of a 400-page report.
How could it?
Exactly. But it gave the appearance, and it was enough
that somehow Barr was covering shit up, right? That's the appearance that they were giving. So Barr, even though he released the whole report, right, by the way, this is the news story that Rachel Maddow 100% got wrong, and the news crawl, her producer, got right. We did a video on that. Check it out. Is where Rachel Maddow was saying that William Barr, 68-year-old. Well, I don't know why she made a big deal out of him being 68. Like that's old or something. Like that's ancient in today's world. I don't know. Jack LaLanne was still tugging locomotives when he was 90. Anyway, so she made a big deal out of how William Barr was somehow being sneaky and not telling us what was in the Mueller report. Turns out her producer knew better. Mueller was actually helping Barr do that redaction. I just want to put that this is, if you show this, Arno, say they are, this is what they are parsing negative statements. If we had confidence the president committed a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. Like, what the F are you guys? Did he commit a crime or not? Well, we don't have any evidence of it, but I don't have any confidence that he didn't. That is a cowardly move, and that's what Robert Mueller is. Robert Mueller's a liar. Robert Mueller's a coward. He'll lie us into wars, and he's a political actor. So Robert Mueller doesn't have integrity. Get that out of your head. He's the head of the FBI. You don't get to be the head of the FBI and have integrity. Hey, we just added St. Louis and Honolulu to our live tour schedule. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets for all our live shows. We might be coming to your town. Go check right now at jimmydorecomedy.com. And if you like the show and want to support it, become a premium member. You can become a patron or through PayPal, or go right to jimmydorecomedy.com and become a premium member. That's the best way. We'll see you at a live show.